Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday live stream. We've got an informative topic for you today. Here it is. Custom splash screens in the Horner OCS. Now, whenever you look at the front of a machine, typically what you see is a colored touchscreen, and most people think of that as the face of the machine. And at Horner, we don't take that lightly. You won't see the Horner logo, all over the front of our colored touchscreen OCS products. What you see typically is a pretty blank canvas, and we do that on purpose. We want this to be your machine, your application. You should have the opportunity to put your branding on the front. And today we're going to show you how to take that one step further by replacing the graphics that pop up at boot up time with your own custom branding. All right, without further delay, let's get right to it. We're going to start by clarifying what we mean by a splash screen. And then we're going to dive right in and show you how to create and install splash screens for Canvas, Prime, and Micro OCS. And there'll be plenty of demonstrations throughout. Here we go. So what do we mean by a splash screen? Well, sometimes it's called a boot up screen, but basically this is what you see when you boot up a product, an electronic product. And typically these splash screens are going to contain company logos and other branding as kind of an advertising opportunity to identify, hey, this product is from this company. On the right there, you can see the kind of ubiquitous Apple logo that you see whenever you boot up your iPhone. So that's what we mean by a splash screen. Now, the Horner OCS, like other electronic products, also has a splash screen, and it varies a little bit by product line. You can see in the upper right-hand corner kind of our traditional Horner splash screen we've used for a while that shows the Horner Cube. Okay, the Cube represents, for those who don't know, the 4 different aspects of all-in-one control: control, I/O, HMI, and networking. Okay, and then we simplified things a little bit on the Canvas series, just going to the Cscape 10H along with the Horner Automation Group logo. But anyway, this is what we chose graphics-wise to put on the screen during boot up. You may want something different, and that's what we're going to show you today, is how to put your images and your logos on the screen. Okay, so what's the process look like? Well, the first step is you're going to need to create the graphic, or probably more than likely take an existing image and modify it to act as a splash screen. And to do that, you're going to need to use a graphics editing software. I'm going to show you Adobe Photoshop, but that's just one of many that could work. Okay, and effectively what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking that image and you're going to be cropping and scaling it so that it matches, the end result that is, matches the exact screen size of the OCS that you're working with. Okay, and then you're going to export that file as a JPEG with a special name, splash.jpg, and you're going to copy that file to the root directory of either a micro SD or a USB drive. Now, to load that particular splash screen, you go to what we call the system recovery system, okay, or the recovery screen, if you will. Okay, well, how do I access that? Well, you access that by pressing and holding the system button for at least 3 seconds. You'll get a special menu that pops up. All right. Now, if you have a unit like we've shown on the screen here that doesn't have a dedicated system key, which is most of them these days, you'll need to press in the upper right-hand corner until all the function keys and the system key slide out. Then press and hold that system button for at least 3 seconds, and you'll see that system recovery menu pop up. And there'll be an option on there to replace system graphics, and that's what you're going to use. Now, in terms of the specifications for that image you're going to be creating, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to be creating an image in the JPEG format, kind of the default JPEG format of RGB mode, 8 bits per channel. Okay, that's typically what you'll find with JPEG. All right, and then you can see the chart of the different resolutions for the different models in the Canvas line here. And then this is what it looks like if you take a look at the images you would create for each of the different units. You can see they're basically scaled to different resolutions. All right, now on the Prime series, it's exactly the same, no differences, okay? You just have a new table here showing additional resolutions, all right, but everything else is the same. All right, so you can see here again, here's what the graphics look like when they're scaled by resolution. Now there is a special case, and that is the XL6 Prime. Now, back in the day, not that long ago really, 5.7-inch HMIs were the most common size on machines. Today it's 7 inches. But the 5.7-inch screens went away a while ago, at least the LCD displays. Most of them are obsolete now. Now, in the case of Horner, we support a lot of OEMs that want to keep their machines running for decades, really. So what we did was, instead of getting rid of the 5.7-inch size, we kept it. But when the 5.7-inch LCDs went away, we had to do something a little creative to keep that going. So what we did was, we took a unit that fits in the existing cutout, and instead of using a 5.7-inch display, we're using a 7-inch display, but there are areas that are covered up on the left and on the right by the front plastic and the front overlay. So if you're going to do a special splash screen for a XL6 Prime, you need to make sure that you keep these dark areas on the left and the right as I've shown here on the screen. Otherwise, it's just a standard JPEG as the rest of them are. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop right here and let me demonstrate for you how to install, after creating, a splash screen for your OCS. Let me just show you some simple steps for taking an image and, turning it into a splash screen. And I'm going to use Photoshop here, but you could use whatever program you're comfortable with. The steps are going to be basically the same idea. Okay, so here's our image that we're starting with. Okay, you're probably going to be starting with some sort of company logo or something like that. All right, and if we go in and take a look at the size of this particular image, you can see it's huge, right? It's 13,000 pixels by, oh, no, I'm sorry, this is in inches. Let's go to pixels here. Okay, so it's still pretty large. Compared with the screen resolution, it's still pretty large. So let's bump this guy down. I'm going to create a splash screen for a Canvas 7D. So it's 800 by 480. So if I make it 800 wide, you can see that my height now is a little bit too short. So instead of making it 800 wide, let's make it 480 tall. And then you can see I'm just a little bit too wide. So that'll probably work to scale it down to a more reasonable size. And now let me go back in here and fit on the screen. Okay, so now we've already scaled it down, even though it doesn't look that obvious that we have, but now our image is significantly smaller in terms of pixels. Now we just need to crop off from the left and the right to get it to exactly 800 pixels wide. So let me go back here, and this time I'm gonna go to canvas size. And again, these are the steps that you would take for Photoshop, not always the same steps that you would take for your editor. But I'm going to chop this down to 800 evenly from all sides. It's going to say, hey, you're going to get some clipping. I'm going to say, that's no problem. And here we go. So now if we take a look at our image size, we can see we're at exactly 800 by 480, which is what we were looking for. Now we just need to make sure we save this file as a JPEG, and we're good to go. Now, my particular file happens to already be a JPEG, but I'm gonna do an export anyway. Okay, I'll use the export feature here and hit export as, and instead of a PNG, let's make it a JPEG. Okay, the default quality settings are probably fine. 800 by 480, that all looks good. So that should be just what we need to do. And we hit export. All right, we'll call it Acme Logo Canvas 7D. All right, hit save, and we're done. Okay, so those are examples of what I had to do in Photoshop with this particular image. Your results may vary, but it's going to be very similar. So here's the file I just edited, and I've put it on a micro SD drive. However, it doesn't have the right file name. Okay, so I need to rename this from its current name to Splash. Okay. All right, so now we have a file called splash.jpg. All right, and we've placed it on the root directory of a micro SD drive. Now we could do it on a USB drive as well. And there can be all kinds of other files on this drive. There doesn't happen to be in my case, but there could be all kinds of other files. It doesn't have to be, empty. But as long as you have splash.jpg in your root directory, you're good to go to the next step. Okay, I've installed the micro SD card here in my Canvas 7D. And once I've done that, let's go to the System menu to make sure that the file is there and ready to go. So I'll press the Media option here. And there, sure enough, splash.jpg is sitting there on the micro SD drive. So that's great. Okay, that's what we were looking for there. All right, now, if you have a unit that doesn't have a dedicated system button, to display the system button, you'll just need to press this corner right here, and then all the function keys and the system button will slide out. All right, now let's call up the system recovery screen so we can replace that splash graphic. And I press and hold the system button. Again, whether it's dedicated or slide out, press and hold that button. And there we have the system recovery screen show up. And one of the options is replace system graphics SD. Now, if I was using USB to replace the system graphics, I'd have to scroll down a bit, but there we go. I'll go ahead and now press this button. Are you sure you want to replace system graphics? I do. Now we just wait. The replace graphics will only take effect after a power cycle. Okay, well let's go ahead and power cycle then. Let's keep our eye out for that splash screen. And there it is. All right, and there it is again. Okay, so we've successfully replaced the built-in splash screen with custom branded graphics. So that's the steps you need to take on either a Canvas or a Prime. The steps are the same for both product families. So we've covered Canvas and Prime, but what about the Micro? Well, the Micro doesn't have a built-in splash screen for you to replace, but you can simulate it easy enough with a graphic and a little bit of logic. Now we're going to focus on the color touchscreen models in the Micro family. The X2 has a low resolution monochrome display. You could do a splash screen, but it's probably just going to be text-based with company name, phone number, maybe your web address, that sort of thing. Okay, so again, we're going to start with a color graphic, scaled to the proper size. But in the case of the Micro, I like to recommend a PNG format if you're using Cscape 10, which you should be using by now because Cscape 10 is tremendous. So start with that graphic, but this time save it to PNG. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to find an empty screen somewhere in your project, and you're going to load that graphic as a full screen graphic on that screen, and then you're going to write a little bit of logic to make that screen show up for the first 5 seconds or so after boot up. So instead of me talking about it, let me show it to you. To create our micro OCS splash screen, let's start in Cscape. Now, what I need is a blank screen somewhere in my project. So my project had 5 screens created originally, so I needed to add another blank one. Under main screen, I hit right click, selected new screen. It automatically came up with the next one in line, which was screen number 6. I renamed it to Splash, and here we are. So what I want to do now is I want to add a graphics object to this new blank screen. It doesn't matter what screen number this is, it just has to be blank. It doesn't have to be the initial screen after power up, it just needs to be blank. All right, so we'll go to Fixed Objects, go to Picture Graphic, click and drag on the screen. That doesn't really matter size-wise and all that sort of thing. Now, instead of scale to fit, I want to retain original size, okay? Because I've pre-scaled my graphic for 800 by 480, okay? Now, I'll also want to max my number of colors and go select my image. Now, let's find the PNG file that I have previously created. Again, PNG is what I prefer to use for the new micros with Cscape 10. It just works out better most of the time. All right, I'll hit open. All right, and there it is. It looks a little distorted in the preview, but don't worry about that. When we go to the regular screen, you can see, boom, it fills everything up nicely and everything is scaled properly and it all looks good. Okay, so we've created our actual splash screen. Now we just got to get it to pop up for the first few seconds after power up. Okay, so let's go take a look at some logic I wrote. Just a couple of rungs here. So on the first scan, I'm going to turn off a bit called splash done. And then when that's off, I've got an off delay timer that's going to run for 5 seconds and then turn that bit off again. But this doesn't actually force the screen. We need to add another coil to actually force the screen to be displayed. So I'll go grab a coil, place it in an open area here on the right, and then I'm going to press the screen button, select the screen that is my splash screen that I created. Okay, leave it to force because we want that screen to be displayed as long as this rung is true, and it's going to be true for the first 5 seconds after the first scan. And that should be the logic and the screen that we need in order to create our own splash screen. Now let's look at it on the bench. Okay, so I've downloaded my program. And now let's do a reboot and see if it worked. There it is. There is our splash screen for 5 seconds. And there we go. Now we're back at the home screen and ready to run the machine. All right, so that was nice and simple. We've created our own splash screen with a different procedure for the micro OCS. So that does it for our topic today. I've got an opportunity for you you don't want to miss. A chance to get a free controller, not through any kind of drawing or any other kind of, something that involves math. But basically, if you've used an Excel Prime, Canvas, or OCS.io in a recent application, fill out a form, a case study form detailing your application, submit it to our marketing group, and you could win a free controller just for doing that. All right, so as long as you've used Excel Prime, Canvas, or OCS.io in the application, you've got an excellent chance of qualifying, and then you can get a free controller. Nothing wrong with free. Okay, Horner OCS training schedule is moving along for 2025. Let's get signed up today. Now, for the next few weeks, we are going to be out and about at trade shows all over the country and other events for that matter. Okay, in April, I'm going to be at the Logic Tech Expos in St. Louis in the Kansas City area. All right. In early May, we've got folks at the Powermation Tech Fair in Des Moines. Just a little bit after that, we're going to be at the Florida Water Resources Conference in Palm Beach, Florida. Then our lighting team will be at the DTE Energy Show in Novi, Michigan. Then we have the big week-long Automate show that you don't want to miss in Detroit, followed by the Powermation Tech Fair in St. Paul, Minnesota on June 12th. So that's only what's happening in the second quarter, not to mention what's going on in the third quarter. So get out there in the field and come see us. Okay, if you want to interact with Horner online, you can do so on our website, on our YouTube channel, and also on LinkedIn. Well, we've had a bit of a scheduling change. Originally next week, we were going to bring in our buddy Nate Beachy. Many of you have met Nate if you've come to factory training. And Nate was going to show us how he edits Cscape 10 variables in a spreadsheet. A nifty trick. But because of a scheduling conflict, we're going to put that off until probably early June. Instead, we have another topic we'll be covering with you. This was requested by a customer. Now, previously, we've shown you how you can calculate tank volume from a level, number of gallons, number of liters, etc., based on common tank geometries. But what if the tank does not have a common geometry, but instead is provided with a data table of level versus volume? Well, we've got another UDFB that takes care of that use case. So join us next week. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, don't hesitate to do so. It doesn't cost anything. And if you choose notifications when you subscribe, you'll be notified every time we go live or every time we post a new video. Okay, so until next week, let's all get out there and do some good.